The man at the center of the Serial podcast has now been released from prison.
A judge has agreed to vacate Adnan Syed's conviction, but that does not mean that the case is necessarily over. Prosecutors are not asserting that he is innocent, but say that they lack confidence in, quote, the integrity of the conviction. Syed walked out of court yesterday and is now in home detention until a new trial is held. Syed was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years for the strangling of Heyman Lee in 1999. He's maintained his innocence for decades.
Joining us now is Kathleen Zellner. She's an attorney who works extensively on wrongful convictions. Her clients have included Stephen Avery, for example, who was the subject of the docuseries Making a Murderer. Kathleen, thanks for joining us to speak about this really stunning development in this case. What can you tell us about what led to this conviction being vacated? As Lana just said, it was the integrity of the conviction that was the issue mainly.
Which we heard so much about during this podcast.
It was the whole focus. So why now is there enough evidence to overturn the conviction completely?
I think it's the accumulation of years of work by the people that believed in Mr. Syed's innocence. There's a Brady violation where there was evidence withheld, an alibi witness that was not pursued by his defense attorney, new DNA testing that's going to be done, and at least two suspects that are now the focus. So this is the common path of these wrongful convictions. What's unfortunate is that it takes so many years for the courts to recognize that someone's been wrongfully convicted, but it's an accumulation of things that resulted in this, outcome. I do think the publicity from the podcast was a major factor in the decision.
Kathleen, prosecutors say that they are confident that they still have the right person. They are expected to retry the case. Explain, first of all, to people who may be surprised to hear that you can be tried twice for the same case, because a lot of people think that that can't happen in the United States. Explain why that's possible in this situation and if you expect a different outcome.
Yes, first of all, I don't think he'll be retried. I think that's just talk right now. I think the evidence will be so overwhelming when the DNA is done. There's a serious Brady violation that's typical for the prosecution to roll it out in stages and then drop the charges. But if he would be retried, it would be because they have not officially acquitted him, walked away from the case. You can't be retried if you've been acquitted, but they can retry if they claim that they still have evidence. But I think the case has fallen apart. It's a typical prosecution strategy to first announce, well, the evidence isn't there to maintain the current conviction. They want a retrial. But this conviction is fatally flawed. If there's a retrial, he'll be acquitted. I think it would be foolish to put him through that, but that's not to say it won't happen. But there's an alibi witness, there's DNA, there's another suspect. I mean, you couldn't have much more wrong with this conviction. So if they want to retry it, I think he will definitely be acquitted. But this is common prosecutors speak, that they never can just say, he's innocent, we made a mistake. They're going to roll it out in stages, but I think his case is essentially over.
What does this say about the U.S. legal system? I mean, there are so many judges who will say in a courtroom that media attention makes no difference. Public pressure will be ignored as I adjudicate this case. But clearly, in this case, and somewhat for what the client of yours, Stephen Avery, and the Making a Murder series, clearly having a national spotlight does have some type of impact. But what does this say about what prosecutors do on a daily basis and how easy it may be in some places to put innocent people behind bars?
Right. Everyone doesn't have the good fortune to have their case, publicized to this extent. But what the publicity does is it shines a light on the flaw in the prosecution. It involves the public. I've received many wonderful tips from the public that have helped me in my cases. So what it tells you is that the cases that do get publicity, that expose what's happened over and over again with the prosecutors withholding evidence ineffective defense counsel, that when they shine a light on it and the public gets behind it, then there's a sense of outrage that the politicians that have been elected as prosecutors across the country will respond to it. So definitely, it's fortunate for the people who get the publicity, unfortunate for those who don't. The main underlying problem is we've given prosecutors absolute immunity, and they need to be held accountable. They need to be held accountable for withholding evidence and basically framing innocent people. And we've seen thousands of cases, but we still have absolute immunity for prosecutors. And that's the fatal flaw in the system.
Kathleen Zellner is now in home detention. He spent more than 2 decades, though, in prison. If they decide not to pursue this case further, what happens next for him and in his quest, as he's always maintained his innocence, in his quest potentially for justice?
He'll bring a civil rights suit, and that will be the way that legally a bright light is shined upon what went wrong in his case. The Brady violations, with the withholding of evidence, not prosecuting the people who actually committed this crime. He will have that recourse. He will have a civil rights case. I'm sure he'll vigorously pursue that. I mean, no amount of money is going to give him back 23 years, but that body of case law is growing, and it shows the same pattern in all of these cases. Evidence is withheld. Many times the star witness for the prosecution is actually the killer. And so there's just a level of incompetence along with just bad faith in these prosecutions. And I'm glad that the public's involved in these. I'm glad there's a sense of outrage, because there should be.
All right. Kathleen Zellner, thank you.
Thank you.